Southern Horrors, Lynch Law in All Its Phases by the Honorable Queen Ida B. Wells. The New Cry. The appeal of Southern whites to Northern sympathizers sanctions the uttered an insipid plea made by Bishop Fitzgerald for the suspension of his judgment because of those who condemned lynching expressed no sympathy for the white women in the case, falls to the ground in light of the foregoing. From this exposition of race issue in lynch law, the whole matter is explained by a well-known opposition outcry of slavery to the progressive race. This is crystallized and often repeated slogan. This is a white man country and a white man must rule. The South represented giving the Afro-American his freedom in the ballot box in the civil rights law. The raids of the Ku Klux Klan and the Whiteliners to divert Reconstruction governments, the Hamburgs and the Ellerton, South Carolina, the Copalis, Mississippi, and the Lafayette Parish, Louisiana, massacres were excused as natural resentment of intelligence against a government of ignorance. Honest white man practically conceded the necessity of the intelligence of murdering and ignorance to correct the mistake of a general government, and the race was left to the tender mercies of the solid South. Thoughtful Afro-Americans with a strong arm of government withdrawn and with the hope to stop such wholesale massacres urged the race to sacrifice its political rights for the sake of peace. They honestly believe the race should fit itself for government, and when it should be done, the objection of the race to participate in politics shall be removed. But the sacrifice did not remove the trouble, nor move the South to justice. One by one, Southern states have legally disenfranchised Afro-Americans. And since the repeal of the Civil Rights Bill, every Southern state has passed separate car laws with a penalty against their infringement. The race, regardless of advancement, is penny and filth and stifling partitions cut off from smoking cars. And all this while, although the political cause had been removed, the butchery of black men at Barnwell, South Carolina, Carrollton, Mississippi, Waycross, Georgia, and Memphis, Tennessee have gone on. Also, the flaying alive of a man in Kentucky, and the burn of one in Arkansas. The hanging of a 15-year-old girl in Louisiana, a woman in Jackson, Tennessee, the other in Hollandale, Mississippi. Until the dark, and the bloody record of the South shows that 728 Afro-Americans lynched in the past 8 years. Not 50 of these were for political causes. The rest for all matters of accusation from that of rape of white women. To the case of a boy, William Lewis, who was hanged in Tullahoma, Tennessee last year for being drunk and sassy to white folks. These statistics compiled by the Chicago Tribune were given in the first year of 1892. Since then, not less than 150 have been known to have met a violent death at the hands of a cruelty, bloodthirsty mob during the past 9 months. To palliate this record, which grows worse as the Afro-American becomes intelligent, and excuse most of the heinous crimes that ever stain the history of the country, the South is shielding itself behind a plausible screen for defending the honor of its woman. This, too, in the face of the fact that only 1/3 of the 728 victims to the mob have been charged with rape. To say none that 1/3 were innocent of that charge. A white correspondent of the Baltimore Sun declares that Afro-American was lynched in Chestertown, Maryland, in May for assault on a white girl was innocent, and that the deed was done by a white man who has since disappeared. The girl herself maintained that her assailant was a white man. When that poor African-American was murdered, the whites excused their refusal on the trial of the grounds. They wished they had spared the white girl the mortification to having to testify in court. This cry has its effect, enclosed hearts and stifled conscience wrapped around the judgment and the hushed voices of the press in the pulpit on the subject of the lynching law throughout the land of liberty. Men who stand high esteem for the public of the Christian character and for the morals and physical courage, for the devotion to the principles of equality and exact justice to all, and for a great sanctity, stand as cowards who fear to open their mouth before the great outrage. They do not see that their tactic of encouragement, their silence of acquiescence, and the shadows of lawlessness in the form of lynch law is spread over the wings of the whole country. Men like Governor Tillman started the ball of lynch law rolling for a certain crime, are powerless to stop it when drunk and criminal whites toughs feel like hanging in Afro-America for any pretense. Even to the better class of Afro-American, the crime of rape is so revolting, they have often taken the white man's word and given the lynch law either an investigation nor a condemnation it deserves. They forget that a concession of the right of lynch law is the man of a certain crime, and not concede the right to lynch any person for any crime. But so frequently in the cry of rape now raised, it is in a fair way to stamp out us a race of rapists and desperados. They have gone on hoping and believing that their general education and financial strength will resolve the difficulty and are devoting their energies to the accumulation of both. The mob spirit has grown increasingly intelligent of the Afro-American. It has left out of the way places where ignorance prevails and has thrown a mass in the new stalks of the city, in the broad lights in large cities and civilizations. It is encouraged by leading citizens in the press. The malicious and the untruthful white press. The Daily Commercial and the Evening Satire of Memphis, Tennessee are owned by leading businessmen of the city. And yet, in spite of the fact there have been no white women in Memphis outraged by an Afro-American, the Memphis possess a thrifty, law-abiding, property-owning class of Afro-American, the Commercial, of May 17, headed by more rapes and more lynching, gave utterance to the following. The lynching of 3 Negro scoundrels reported in our dispatch from Addison, Alabama, for the brutal outrage committed upon a white woman will be the text of comment on Southern barbarism by Northern papers. But we fancy it as hardly proven effective for the campaign purposes among the intelligent people. The frequency of these lynchings called their attention to the frequency of the crimes which has caused the lynching. The Southern barbarism, which deserves the serious attention of all people North and South, is barbarism which preys upon the weak and defenseless woman. Nothing but a more most prompt and speedy and extreme punishment can hold in check the horrible and bestial propensity of the Negro race. There is a strangely similarity about the numbers and the cases of the character which has been occurred lately. In each of the cases, the crime was deliberately planned and perpetrated by several Negroes. They watched for opportunity when women were left without their protector. It was suddenly not yielding to fit for passion, but the consumption of a devilish purpose which have been seeking and waiting for the opportunity. The features of the crime not only make it more fiendishly brutal, but adds to a terror of the situation that is thinly settled in the country communities. No man can leave his family at night without the dread of some roving Negro ruffian is watching and waiting for his opportunity. The swift punishment which is verily followed these horrible crimes doubtless acts as deterring upon effect of Negroes in the immediate neighborhood for a short time. But the lesson is not widely learned nor long remembered. Then such crimes, equally atrocious, happens in quick succession, one in Tennessee, one in Arkansas, one in Alabama. The facts of the crime appear to appeal more to the Negro lustful imagination than the facts of punishment due to all his fears. He set aside all the fears of death in any form when an opportunity is found for its gratification for its bestial desires. There is a small reason to hope for any chance of the better. The commission of this crime grows more frequent every year. The generation of Negroes which have grown up since the war has lost a large measure of traditional wholesale awe of the white race, which keeps the Negroes in the subjugation, even when their masters were in the army, and their families were left unprotected except by the slaves themselves. There is no longer restraint upon the brute passion of the Negro. What is to be done? The crime of rape is always horrible, but to Southern men, there is nothing which fills his soul with horror, loathing, and fury as to be outraged of a white woman by a Negro. It is the race question in the ugliest and vilest and most dangerous aspect. The Negro as a political factor can be controlled, but neither laws nor lynching can subdue his lust. Sooner or later it will force a crisis, and we do not know in what form it will come. In its issue of June 4th, the Memphis Evening Senator gives the following. The excuse for lynch law. Aside from the violations of white women by Negroes, which is an outcropping of a bestial perversion of instinct, the chief cause of the trouble between the races of the South is the Negro's lack of manners. In a state of slavery, he learned politeness with association with white people who took pains to teach him. Since emancipation, he has come to untie the mutual interest and regards between master and slave servant was broken. The Negro has drifted away in a state which is neither freedom nor bondage. Lacking proper inspiration on one and a restraining force of the other, he has taken up the idea of a bourgeois insolence and independence. And the exercise to the decent degree of breeding towards white people is identical with his servile submission. In consequence of the prevalence of the notion, there are many Negroes who use every opportunity to make themselves offensive, and particularly when anything that can be done with impunity. And we have too many incidents right here in Memphis to doubt this. Our experience is not exceptional. White people will not stand for this sort of thing, and whether they be insulted as individuals, as a race, and the response will become prompt and effectual. The Bloody Riot of 1866, in which so many Negroes perished, was brought principally on the outrageous conduct of the blacks towards whites in the streets. It is also remarkable the discouraging fact that the majority of such scoundrels are Negroes and who receive education advantages at the hands of the white taxpayers. They have got nothing, just enough of learning to make them realize how hopeless their race is behind every other thing that makes a great people. And they attempt to get even by insolence, which is their resentment of their inferiors. There are well-bred Negroes among us who are truly unfortunate that they actually have to pay, even in part, in the penalty of the offenses committed by the base of sorts. But this is the way of the world. The innocent must suffer for the guilty. If the Negroes as a people possessed 100 part of self-respect, which is evidenced by the courteous bearing of some of the symptoms could name, the friction between the races will diminish, will be reduced to a minimum. It will not have to beg the question by Lean that many white men are also stirring up strife. The Caucasian blackguard simply obeys the promptings of the depraved position. He is seldomly and deliberately rough or offensive toward the strangers or unprotected women. The Negro tough, on the contrary, is given to just that kind of offending, and he is almost invariably singled out white people as his victims. On March 9th, 1892, there was a lynching in the same city of three of the best specimens of the War of the Young since the Afro-American manhood. They were peaceful, law-abiding citizens and energetic businessmen. They believed the problem was to be solved by eschewing politics and putting money in the purse. They owned a flourishing grocery store in a thickly populated suburb of Memphis, and a white man named Barnett had one on the opposite corner. After a personal difficulty, which Barnett sought to go into the people's groceries, drawing his pistol, and was thrashed by Calvin McDonald, he and Barnett threatened to clean him out. These men were a mile beyond the city limits and police protection. Hearing that Barnett crowd was coming to attack them Saturday night, they mustered forces and prepared to defend themselves against the attack. When Barnett had led a posse of officers, 12 in number, who came afterwards claiming to be hunting for a man whom they had a warrant, the 12 men in the citizen clothes should think it's necessary to go out in the night to hunt for a man who they had never had been arrested, or any record of criminal arrest before never been explained. When they entered the back door, the young man thought the threatened attack was on and fired into him. 3 of the officers were wounded, and while defending the party was found it was an officer of the law upon they had fired on, they ceased and got away. 31 men were arrested and thrown in jail as conspirators, although they had declared more than once they did not know they were firing upon officers. The excitement was at a fever beat until the morning papers, 2 days after, announced that the wounded deputy sheriffs were out of danger. This hindered rather than helped the plans of the whites. There was no law or statute in the books which would execute an Afro-American for wounding a white man, but the unwritten law did. 3 of these men, the president, the manager, and the clerk of the grocery store, the leaders of the conspiracy, were secretly taken from jail and lynched in a shockingly brutal manner. The Negroes are getting too independent, they say. We must teach them a lesson. What lesson? The lesson of subordination. Kill the leaders in the cow and the Negroes who dare to shoot a white man even in self-defense. Although the Waste was wild over the outrage, the mockery of law and justice which demanded men to lock them in jails where they could easily be freed instead of reaching a mob. The Afro-American news ministers, newspapers, leaders, and counsel obedient to the law which did not protect them. Their counsel was not heeded in hand and was lifted up to resentment and outrage following the article or following the vice of the free speech. People left the city in great numbers. The dailies and Associated Press reports behind the heralds of these men into the country as toughs and Negroes desperado who kept a low drive. The same press service print that the Negro who was lynched in L.O., Mississippi in May had outraged a sheriff's 8-year-old daughter. The girl was more than 18 years old and was found by her father in a man's room who was a servant on the place. Not to contend in misrepresenting the race, the mob spirit was not to be satisfied until the paper, which all is doing, could counteract the impressions with silence. The colored people were representing their bad treatment in a way to make itself felt, yet gave the mob no excuse further murder until the incident, to the appearance of the editorial, which is given in these pages. They would not have lynched the manager of the free press for exercising his right of free speech. If they had found them quickly, yes, they would have hung the rapist and gladly the excuse to do so. The owners will not return. The free speech was suspended with little compunction, and the business of the People grocery store broken up and the proprietors murdered. All right, that was Ida B. Wells, The Soldiers of Southern Justice, Lynch Law, The Malicious and Untruthful White Press. That was that chapter. And in that chapter, she kind of broke down. It was a white businessman. We making more money. The black business people was making more money than them. So the white boys went in and threatened with a pistol. And, Glenn got the police on the side and just went in and tried kicking his door. And he busted him up. And they lynched him awful. And went and took his property afterwards. Also, it explains that the Lynch law, because of they would just use the term rape and, war rapes and stuff like that, that would used to be justified for their claims of doing things like this. Like I said before, do not let that be your vice. You don't have to be in Pinky Land or messing with these white women like that. Do not let that be your vice. That's a bad vice to have. Very bad. You know what I'm saying? So with that being said, subscribe to the channel. Much love. And start African history groups. African study groups. Peace and have a good one.